Hi everybody, this is Sara Chapman, and this is my sixth project for the class. It's a discovery project where I read the first part of WASSILY Kandinsky's Concerning the Spiritual in Art. I've been wanting to read this book for a while, and then in one of my history classes, we were assigned to read a 10,000 word primary source and encouraged to do something that would be useful to one of our other classes or in our personal life, and so I decided to multitask a little bit here. And it took me a little bit over 3 hours to get through the first part of it and take notes and everything for it. And yeah, this relates to the class because Wassily Kandinsky was a very prominent artist in the 20th century. And this book really covers his personal philosophy as well as it's kind of an art manifesto in a way of modern art and abstraction. So just a little bit of background on Kandinsky. He was born in 1866 and died in 1944. He was born in Russia, but he worked extensively in Germany especially, and then he also spent some time in Paris when the Nazi Party took over Germany and started condemning degenerate artwork. And then he worked within and was influenced by many different art movements, including Impressionism, Fauvism, Expressionism, as well as the Bauhaus. And he actually became a professor at the Bauhaus. And Kandinsky is really known as being a father of abstraction in modern art, and he's really iconic for quote-unquote hearing color and those parallels that he drew between visual art and music. And so basically for this presentation, I'm just going to show you some of the notes that I took, things that really stood out to me in each chapter of the first part of this book, and then just some pictures of some of the notes that I took. So we have some different things here in the introduction. He just really kind of introduces his philosophy about art in general, and especially comparing external art where the artist is only concerned about getting money, which is like art for art's sake, versus a more spiritual art that's focused on the inward and really looking into yourself as an artist. And if you use the spiritual art that's really inwardly focused, it can be reinterpreted and reused, kind of immortalized as time goes on, where it's still applicable to future time periods where external art that's just purely born out of the culture is, he says that it's kind of a dead art after the culture moves on. So then this is the second chapter called The Movement, and in this chapter, he introduces this idea of a prophet. There's this really good quote. It is then that there unfailingly arises some human being no different from the rest of humanity, but for a secret power of vision within him. And so he kind of compares this prophet as an artist, and then he introduces his iconic triangle of spiritual life, where it's broken into horizontal segments, and each segment going higher and higher is a smaller group of people and represents a more spiritually advanced artist. And then these artists who are able to look beyond the present stage and the present segment that they're on are prophets, and they're able to help those around them and those under them, and the whole triangle move forward. And then in chapter 3, he basically just breaks down what kinds of people and what kinds of artists are in these different segments, with the lower segments being the biggest, and they receive a lot of recognition, but they're not as spiritually advanced. And so he kind of places heavily influenced atheists at the bottom, and then they kind of go up and up with a very select few at the top, at the point of the triangle, who he calls visionaries. And then there can be prophets throughout these segments. And let's see, and he also introduces, he comments a little bit on literature and music as well as other mediums that can be used in the same concept of having non-material art is something that he talks a lot about as a way of kind of expressing the inner thoughts and inner feelings of somebody, the inner world, the spiritual world. And with literature, he talks about how words are on a page, but their meaning is in like an inner sound, that their meaning actually resides beyond material. And then just in music, balancing conventional and inner beauty, and then applying these concepts to visual art as well, where finding the divine in art is being able to balance color and form, as he says. And he uses Matisse and Picasso as examples of kind of two polar opposites of artists, where Matisse relies too much on color, while Picasso relies too much on form. And then in chapter 4, this is titled The Pyramid, and Yeah, he basically just sums everything up where this time period is a really important, momentous time in history for art, where movements are so close to each other. And then he also does this iconic comparison of music to art and talks about, I love this passage right here. I think it's kind of funny where he's just talking about that a good painter is able to look at music and the non-material nature of music and want to apply those concepts to visual art, and doing that through rhythm, abstraction, motion, and color repetition. And then just this final quote: anyone who absorbs the innermost hidden treasures of art is an enviable partner in building the spiritual pyramid, which is meant to reach into heaven. And so here are my works cited. Thank you